right, hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel, or if you're listening on my podcast, welcome back to the podcast. This is going to be another YouTube video slash podcast episode, so I hope that you're enjoying whatever platform you are listening or watching on, but I am so happy to have you back. I've been dying to do this video slash episode for ages, and I feel like this was the perfect time to sit down and do it. And after I've just run London, before I start training for Chicago, and that is my journey of running marathons. I've run 8 marathons in the span of less than 4 years. I've definitely gotten faster than I ever thought I could get, and so really wanted to make this video for those that want to get faster one day. I want to preface and say that you by no means need to run fast, or you don't need to have the goal of running fast in order to run marathons or just run in general. I think it's great to just have the goal of running a distance or running for longer. Everyone has different goals, but if your goal is to run faster, this video is for you. I want to also preface by saying I am not certified as a running coach. I do have a running coach, and I've had one for the past year, so I've learned quite a lot from that, and I'm definitely tempted to just read more books and just take up some classes, just learning more about running for myself and just so that I know a little bit more. And yeah, I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to talk about this, and I want to start by kind of talking through every single race, every single marathon that I've done. I've done other distances, but we're focusing on the marathon today, and I want to focus on distances and what my running journey has looked like. And then for the second half of the video, I really want to talk and focus on what I believe are the top 5 things that really helped me get faster. So just sit back and relax, as I would say in my podcast, and we will just jump right into this video slash podcast episode. Also, side note, I just got back from a haircut, and I have been getting more layers this year, and it's definitely a bit weird to get used to at first, but let me tell you, if you are a runner girl that is struggling with just having heavier ponytails, I would highly recommend getting layers in your hair, because it really just helps with the weight of your ponytail. But that is besides the point. So I want to start with all of my races. And before I start with my first proper race, I want to start with a bit of a controversial sort of I guess first almost marathon that I have really never spoken about, rarely ever. And that is in February of 2020, when I was really truly getting into distance running. I was by no means following any sort of a structured training plan. I didn't have a coach. I was purely running off of number 1, vibes, but number 2, heartbreak. I'm just gonna put it out there and just be blunt. I'm very happily in a relationship now, but I just want to say that I know that a lot of people get into running due to heartbreak. So if you're also one of those people, hi. Me too. I need to preface with a whole backstory. Basically, I ran my first half marathon ever in November 2019. It was the first thing I ever trained for properly. Before that, I couldn't run more than a 10K. And so I really was suddenly so obsessed with and really into the idea of running longer distances, and each of them feeling like a massive achievement. And so following my half marathon and after Christmas time and stuff, I just found myself running further and further every weekend. And so for a while, I would just run 13 miles just to continuously prove that I could run 13 miles. And then one weekend I was I feel like I could go for longer. And then I ran 17 miles. And then the next weekend I ran 18 miles and 19 miles, and it goes on. And so we get to the end of February 2020. And this was right before I moved back home to my parents' house in the States for the pandemic. And that is a whole nother story for another time. But I was going through some things because I don't think that a lot of people just do this on a Saturday morning for fun. But as you can see here, I ran 24 miles across almost every bridge in central London just on a random Saturday morning. And how long it took me? 5 hours, 18 minutes, and 54 seconds. That was an average of 13 minutes and 17 seconds per mile. I remember someone had asked me at a house party. They were are you training for a marathon? And I was no. And then I suddenly was oh wait, I'm super close to that distance. And so literally the next week, and this is why I'm saying don't try this at home, literally the next week I went out and tried again, and literally went out with the goal of let me go and see if I can run a marathon. And again, I'll stick some stats on the screen. And so this run I only ended up doing 25 miles, but this run took me 5 hours, 27 minutes, and 26 seconds. And I definitely got injured after that. That was my very first running injury, and I learned my lesson not to do that. And after that, I started following more structured training. But I want to use that as an example just to show that because whenever I refer to my first ever marathon, official marathon, that was actually the Holland Aspen Trail Marathon. But that is also it wasn't really what I was intending for it to be. I didn't know it was going to be a trail marathon, as stupid as that sounds. And I have a whole podcast episode explaining, and I will link it in the show notes / the details or box below. I often refer to that as my first marathon. And I feel like people look at that and think like, oh, well, of course it took you X amount of time because you were running, thousands of feet of elevation and like all of this stuff through like a national forest. And just for context there, my first ever trail marathon took me 5 hours, 29 minutes, and 54 seconds. And that in itself was amazing because, like I said, I had no idea that I was going to be running a trail marathon. But I just wanted to share like those first sort of screenshots from my Apple Fitness app, because there was once a time where like I was just running just to run because I was going through some things, and that pace was the pace that I started at and what I truly believe to be like what I began at and what was like my first, I guess, like what I compare to versus where I'm at now. And at the time, I would never share any of these training runs on social media. I didn't have Strava. I think I just used like the Nike app, maybe not even that by then, but I would like, whenever I took a picture of my watch, like I do now on social media, I would like scroll on my Apple Watch so that it didn't show like my pace or like how long it took me. And I don't know, I was just like, I hate to say it, but I was embarrassed. And like, I don't want to tell you that this pace has like anything to do with like how you should feel about that pace if you run that pace. I'm just sharing for like anyone who might feel that way to say like, I was definitely just like really insecure about my pace at one point in time. And I never truly thought that I could get faster. So I just wanted to use that as like the, I guess, like first starting point of this video / podcast episode. So I hope that that wasn't too much, but I'm going to jump into like my proper race history, and I'm just going to go through them and try and go through them a lot quicker than I just attempted to explain all of that. So like I said, my first ever official marathon was the Holland Aspen Trail Marathon, and I finished that, like I said, in a finish time of 5 hours, 29 minutes, and 54 seconds. That was the first time that I also had followed like some sort of a training plan. I found a free plan online, and I was literally just like following it. And this was during 2020 when I was living at my parents' home, and I was following that. I had actually signed up for a different race that was definitely a road marathon, but like many races in 2020, that one got canceled. And so I had just like completed my first ever 16-week training block, and I was like, I am so itching to run a marathon just so that I can like complete this and be like, yeah, I did it. And so at the time I was living in Washington State with my parents, and we just looked at the next state, and Oregon happened to have a trail marathon, which seemed pretty safe at the time because you were like pretty spread out on a trail. And so I went and did that and had a lot of fun. I think I would definitely return to trails one day and maybe do an ultra, but that is maybe for the future, TBD, not right now. I think right now I still have some goals with the road marathon. And so yeah. Next marathon that I did was the London Marathon 2021, and that was like my first ever proper road marathon, and I finished that in a time of 4 hours, 12 minutes, and 26 seconds. I did this with a charity, and I did it with Boston Children's Hospital, raising money, so that's how I got my place. And this was like when I had moved back to London for work, and I really enjoyed this. I was running with like the vest of like the charity. I wore leggings, and I was wearing carbon plated shoes, and I was also wearing a hydration vest. I spent the first couple, and I also should say that in my trail marathon, I also wore my hydration vest, but I want to just also share that like just because I don't run with one now doesn't mean that I didn't once run with one. So like there's nothing wrong with running with one, but I'm also going to talk about that later in this video. So yeah, I wore that outfit. I'll share a photo. I looked very different to what I look like now, I feel like. And I would say that like that was another time where like I followed, I think, one of the plans that the charity had offered. And so I was following that. I had COVID one of the weeks. And so like I didn't have like a full 16-week, 20-week training plan, but I feel like it was still a pretty solid training block. And I was really pleased with that time, and I felt like, wow, like that's a lot faster than I thought I could do. And so I feel like after that I was just like, wow, could I go sub 4? The next marathon that I did was the Paris Marathon 2022. So London Marathon 2021 was like back when it was still in the fall, and now it's in the spring. And so I did that one in the fall, and I did Paris Marathon 2022 in the spring. And that one I was doing it with Sports Direct. I was wearing like a t-shirt, leggings, a hat, the hydration vest, and I went to Paris with my best friends, and I finished that in a time of 4 hours, 13 minutes, and 40 seconds. So it was a minute slower, but I wasn't like super, super bummed about it. But again, like I had kind of followed a training plan that I found online, just something for free. It wasn't anything like tailored or structured to me. And that was fine for me at the time because my biggest really goal at the time was to go sub 4. And I kind of like wanted to see if I could do it on my own. But yeah, I feel like that one was mostly just like for fun. And I was there with my best friends and just really had a good time. Okay, sorry, we had to change positions because my legs were falling asleep. But we went from Paris Marathon to then Berlin Marathon, which is actually the race day top that I am wearing now. I ran into Berlin Marathon 2022 with Alzheimer's Society, so I was raising money for them as a charity, and I wore their t-shirt and then my hydration vest. And then this was a pretty big one because I wore biker shorts for the first time, and I ran in a time of 4:10:57. And again, it didn't really challenge myself very much with training. I still just like, I found a random plan and I sort of just did something that I felt like would be pretty easy and like pretty okay for me. And I didn't really want to challenge myself too much. And I also want to just like make a note that like for a long time, I also felt pretty insecure about my legs, and I used to wear leggings a lot. So like this was also a pretty big like pivotal moment for me in terms of like deciding to race in biker shorts, which is now like my go-to preference of like whatever bottoms I wear for a marathon. And so yeah, it was a really good day out. I was pleased with my time. It was a PB at the time, and like ultimately I was so hungry for a sub 4 marathon. So that was sort of like the point that I decided that I wanted to get coaching. I did technically do another marathon a week after Berlin, which was the London Marathon 2022. I had a place with the London Marathon social media team, and I was purely just there to create content. And so I can't even remember my time because it really wasn't like my race. And so I was literally just like running for fun. I really enjoyed it and enjoyed like really taking in the atmosphere, capturing a lot of content, saying hi to a lot of people that followed me online, and that was just purely like for fun. I did end up like going off and like doing a lot of shorter distance races after that and PBing a bunch of my different distances, but I also ended up going and getting injured. That was like a really tough time for me between like Berlin Marathon and Manchester Marathon, because Manchester Marathon 2023 was the next race that I had signed up for, but I had also signed up to coaching around the same time that I got injured, and I managed to get the all clear from my physio about 3 months after getting injured, and like that gave me a total of like 6 weeks to train for Manchester Marathon, which was not a lot of time, but my coach was like, okay, we're gonna make it happen. We're gonna do it in a smart way. We only kept it to 4 runs a week, so just 4 sessions, and we kept it pretty controlled, nothing too over the top. And I ended up getting one of the biggest PBs, and I got a 28-minute PB at Manchester Marathon 2024. And this was actually also the first marathon that I didn't wear a hydration vest. And I had been thinking about whether or not I wanted to do that for a long time. Just, I think based off of like, because I went and did all of those shorter distance races between Berlin and Manchester, I really just felt like I felt such a difference in my form, like when I wore a hydration vest versus when I didn't. And the hydration vest that I specifically wore had a big like water sack on my back rather than like anything in the front. And so yeah, I think I just realized like throughout training as well that I didn't need as much water as I thought I did if I just made sure to hydrate properly and have electrolytes like the night before and like just like regularly throughout training. And so yeah, I went out, I wore a tank top and biker shorts, which again was like a total new outfit for me and something that like previous me like would never think of wearing, because she used to be so insecure about her body and like just like that runner's body mentality. But I think that was probably like my best and most confident race, and from that point like everything just like skyrocketed. And I feel like that was like really the turning point where I really started to question like, okay, I did break sub 4, but like I broke it so much more than I ever thought I could. Like, how much further can I go? And so I finished Manchester Marathon 2023 in a time of 3:42:31, and I was so proud of that one. It was amazing. I still have a YouTube video from that if you want to go and watch. Gabriel took some really, really great videos from that day. And yeah, there was like a point in the race where he was running alongside me, and I was like, and he was telling me that I was on track for like a 3:44 or something. And I was like, I feel like I'm going too fast, but like I also feel really comfortable and okay. So like, I don't know. And so yeah, I feel like there was a huge turning point with my training, and it was really exciting at the time. And I was really excited to kind of like see what could possibly be next. And so that's when I like continued on with coaching, and I continued to PB in some of my shorter distances. But really what I was gearing up for next was Chicago Marathon 2023. And so a lot of you might have come to this channel for Chicago Marathon 2023, like when I first shared like all those race day videos and really started like to post on this channel more on YouTube. And Chicago was the first race where my coach said to me, I think you're capable of a BQ. And the thing was, like, for so long, I always thought like it would be so cool to BQ, but that felt like such a far away goal. Like when we're talking about like, you know, some of those first races where I was like, where I broke 5 hours and I was like, you know, 4:10, 4:12, 4:13. I knew I was capable of doing sub 4, but like at the time I didn't know how capable I was of a BQ, but I kind of figured, and I thought like, okay, like I think maybe one day I could, but just like not yet. When my coach said that to me last summer, that she wanted me to work towards a BQ and because she thought that I was capable, it was a pretty big moment for me because I didn't think that we would be going for that soon. And so this was also like my first proper training block with a coach, 16 to 20 weeks, like full training, like more than 4 days a week. And it was my first time also training for a very specific time. I think like with Manchester, like, I don't know, I said to my coach like sub 4, and he was like, I think that that's doable, but like, let's not put too much pressure on yourself because you've just come back from injury. I really went into Manchester being like, whatever happens today, like happens, but I'm just happy to be here healthy on the start line. And with Chicago, I think that like, I just became so obsessed during the training with like paces and hitting paces. And I've shared a lot about that on social media and my podcast, and just like how much I just like really got into a world of my own, and like really, I don't know, I kind of like lost the enjoyment for running because I was so obsessed with whether or not I hit pace that I would like literally let that affect my entire workout and my entire day. And if I wasn't hitting pace, which kind of was like more so typically like most of my runs, I don't know, I was just really moody and I just like wasn't happy with myself. I didn't believe in myself, and I really was questioning whether or not I was going to be able to break 3:30 in Chicago, and it felt like a very impossible goal in my head. And so I really feel like I went into Chicago Marathon last fall with like a huge fear and a lot of anxiety in my head of like failing. And like that whole past year in 2023, I spent like literally doing PB after PB, and it was insane because I really feel like I was waiting for the nail to drop, and I was like waiting for like when I was not going to PB, because I was like, this is crazy, because like surely I can't just keep PBing. The thing is like that's what people were telling me, and so I kept fearing like, when is that going to happen? And Chicago was also like the first time that I said a pretty big goal for me out loud. And I think that anytime that you do that, like I've said in previous videos, you get met with criticism, you get met with hateful comments online, and people saying, you know, whether or not they believe that you can do it, even though they're not the one training, they're not you. Anyways, I think that there was just a lot in my head alongside some dodgy oatmeal on race day morning. I'm sorry, Elizabeth's oatmeal or whatever that brand is, but I will not be having that ever again before a race. There are chia seeds in the oatmeal, unfortunately, and I just didn't pack my own breakfast. So I went to the grocery store and they were all out of plain oats. And so that was the next best thing for me. And yeah, that made for a very, very uncomfortable race. And I just spent like that entire race just not enjoying it, and just like not, I don't know, I think I was just like really, really struggling. And the entire time that I was running Chicago, I really like wasn't taking any of it in. I wasn't letting myself enjoy it. I was very like strict with myself in my head of like making sure that I was hitting pace, so much so that like by 10K, Gabriel, he took a video of me when I was crossing one of the bridges, and I already looked like I was like at mile 20. And I think it was because like I went out too fast for sure, and then I just could not like get my pace back, / like my stomach was just like, I felt like I was gonna poop my pants the entire time. And the thing was, I wasn't going to stop at a bathroom because again, I wanted to give myself the best shot of getting a BQ. And for me, I just didn't think that I had the time to allow for me to go to the bathroom and let whatever happen. And so I crossed the finish line in 3:32:09, which is still like my best marathon time to date. And like when I reflect back now, like present Liz, I am so proud. In the moment, because of like everything that had accumulated and like everything that I'd let, like in terms of like just like letting myself become so obsessed with pace and so obsessed with like hitting a certain time goal, I broke down so hard crying to my dad. And I don't know, I look back on that video of me like crying and like weeping about this amazing time. And I'm just like, I was so like in the wrong headspace for last year's race. And so I like came out of that, eventually kind of like got my head together and was like, okay, right, like, we need to change this. And I really tried to go into London earlier this year with a much better headset and mindset. And I really truly think that something clicked in like the last few weeks. But I also did go into London Marathon training with a knee niggle in the beginning that was like super on and off. And then I got made redundant. And so there was just like a lot going on physically, mentally. And there's something that people say about like things that you let like accumulate in your body in terms of like stress or anxiety or things that you're holding on to. And I think that I rely on running a lot to give me like that endorphin release or like that, mental health opportunity just to like take in a big sigh of relief. And yeah, I went into London and I still had a really good time. I was proud of the training block. I felt a lot more comfortable at that like BQ pace. And we were aiming for a 3:20 with the new like buffer time that had happened last year. And yeah, I went out and had a really great first half, but unfortunately at mile 16, I wasn't having a good time because I got a couple of stitches, which made it just really hard to breathe. And I went from like feeding off of the crowd's energy, really enjoying that, to suddenly just being like, I literally can't breathe. And I was like tuning everything out and just like didn't have the best end of the marathon, which is unfortunate because I love London Marathon. I think it's the best marathon in the world and my favorite one so far. I've run it 3 times, hoping to run it a 4th time next year. And yeah, those are all 8 marathons to date. At London Marathon, I wore, again, a tank and shorts, and I should also note arm sleeves for London Marathon 2024 and Chicago Marathon 2023. And Manchester Marathon 2023. So like the outfit changes over the years has been quite interesting in terms of just like, I think I've just like really built a lot more confidence in myself as a runner, and I'm really proud of that. Just my ability to be proud of my body for its strength rather than like trying to tell myself that I have to look a certain way in order to wear certain clothes, especially during a race and a day like when you're running a whole freaking marathon. As many of you know, I will be running Chicago Marathon again this fall, and I am very determined to have a much better time, and I am excited to share my goals, what training is going to look like, and everything. I'm going to do that in a separate video because I'm going to do a whole nother series like I did with London Marathon 2024, and so I'm excited to bring that to you. But today, we're now going to focus on what I believe are the top tips that really helped me get faster in the marathon distance over the years. I'm going to take a quick matcha break, and I just want to share the cutest race day cup mug that I have ever received. This is actually from a follower that has an Etsy store that I will link in the show notes of this episode / I keep saying details box. I can't remember what it's called on YouTube, but I love this mug and it is literally the cutest ever. This is literally my bib number from London Marathon, and you just like go around and it has like all different kinds of like gear, but I love this. Okay, so now let's talk about what I believe are the top 5 things that have helped me get faster in my marathon times. Again, I want to reiterate that I am not a certified running coach. I am literally just speaking purely off of experience and someone who's been distance running for almost 4 years now and has been coached for the past year. So I do feel like I've learned quite a lot from my coaches and I am excited to share that with you. But I also am purely going off of my experiences and what I believe has like really helped me. So like what helped me may not help you, but I hope it helps you in some sort of way. So starting off, I feel like the first key thing that helped me quite obviously was just like having an actual training block and actually following some sort of plan. Now I know that this isn't going to be accessible to everyone financially. So like I'm not telling you that like everyone needs a running coach. You definitely don't. I think that like it definitely depends on what your goals are and what your financial budget is for running. I know that like obviously for most of us running is not our full-time job and we are not elite runners. We are just doing this as a hobby. And so it really depends on what your goals are. I think that some of the perks for me with having a running coach have definitely been that like they obviously keep you accountable. They write you a plan that's very specific and tailored to you and your training, your paces, and what your goals are. And you can go and find a lot of this like online in terms of like if you were to Google search like a sub 3:30 marathon plan, you will find that. Whether or not that is tailored specifically to you and your training, especially if you're a female, is another question. And I think that like for that reason, I really got to a point with like these free online plans where I was like, some of the workouts would be good, but other ones just felt like they were so incredibly fast for me. And I learned from a friend that like a lot of these plans are actually written for men. They're written by men for men. And so I think for that reason, I really enjoy having a female coach specifically as well, because she can talk me through a whole lot that I feel during a whole month of training, and like different emotions that I feel, different, days I have different, and like why some days I feel stronger than other days and why other days I'm struggling with a pace that I may have hit easily the week before. And so I think for that reason, it is really cool to have a coach. It's really nice to have a coach and to have someone to bounce ideas off of and just to like talk to when you don't know what is going on with your running, or you have questions, or you're so confused. So I think for that reason, like if you want a coach, I would definitely recommend that. But I know that there are definitely a lot of other ways to get coaching or like follow some sort of a free plan. But if you have any sort of goals in pertaining to like running a marathon or just running a race, I would highly recommend following structured training and not being like me and going and running 24 miles one week and then trying to run a marathon the next week and then getting injured. So take that from me. I think that was definitely the first obvious point here. My second tip is around gear. Now, you don't have to have every piece of running gear that you see online. I think that it's definitely overhyped right now in terms of like what people are like showing you in terms of like my get ready with me, and like even with like my own get ready with me's on my social media. Like you don't need to go out and buy every single thing that I have. I think that over the years, I've just kind of like tried out different things and I've seen what works for me. But I think this is more so for me pertaining to like shoes and making sure that you aren't just going out and buying Hokas just because you see everyone online wearing Hokas, but like actually going and getting a gait analysis done at a running store or like from a running specialist so that they can properly fit you to a shoe for your feet. Everyone's feet are different, and your feet are like the most important things when it comes to running. So you need to make sure that you have shoes that will support you or the amount of training that you're going to do, the distances you're going to run. And I think that that's just like such a key thing that a lot of people overlook, and they'll just like go and buy like Alpha Flies and be running everyday runs in Alpha Flies because they see people online doing it. And it's like, realistically, you need to find something that will support your everyday run. Then once you want to get faster, you can go and look into like different types of like carbon plated shoes, or like there's so many different types of shoes to get faster. You don't have to do a carbon plated shoe. And I think that like it's definitely trial and error type of thing. So you have to find what works for you. Don't just go and get what everyone's wearing online. I think that I will always like stick by that. And I think that that's so important, especially for people who are new to the running space, to like know that you don't just have to go and buy every single thing that someone is wearing on a Get Ready With Me video. Like you need to find what works for you, clothes that will make you feel the most comfortable and support you the best, and as well as the shoes that will just be properly fitted for your feet and not lead to injury, not lead to any pains. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say on gear. Number 3, I think, is probably one of the most important parts in me getting faster, and that was nutrition. And I've spoken very openly and candidly about my past with an eating disorder and being diagnosed at 16 with anorexia. I think that many runners in the running space have at some point faced some sort of like a weird relationship with food. And if you haven't, keep things that way, like you're one of the lucky ones. But for those of us who have sort of ebbed and flowed with our relationships with food, I think it's really important when it comes to running to view yourself as a runner like a car, to view food as fuel, specifically like carbohydrates, proteins, and like really emphasize the carbohydrates, because I think that if you grew up in the same years that I did, and even now in everyday like media, I think that it still paints a really negative picture of carbohydrates, when really carbohydrates are like the main fuel source for your running and your ability to run longer and go faster if you want. I think that like carbs take you so much further, and for such a long time with my running, I really held myself back in that area. And I wasn't very open about it because I still sort of just like struggled with weird relationship issues with food, and I just like didn't really feed that much into carbs, and like literally like did not eat that many carbs, which is so bad for a runner. And I just like didn't know what to do about it, but I was still like letting that overpower me, and I was letting that hold me back up until last year after Manchester, when I was just like, okay, let's just sit down and have an honest conversation with ourselves. But last year after Manchester Marathon, I really sat down with myself and I was just like, okay, what is truly going to take my running to the next level, like I've just done this amazing PB, but like truly if I want to BQ, I need to look at things that is not just running related. And I'm very fortunate in the sense that I have a very supportive and loving partner who also loves running. And he just was very honest with me, and he just said like, I noticed that you don't eat a lot of carbohydrates, and I think it's really important that you do. And so he really supported me in helping me heal that part of my relationship with food. And I feel like that truly led to all of the PBs that followed after. I don't think that that was all just pure coincidence. I think that because I was challenging myself in that way to eat more and just like not fear the pastries, not fear the pizza, and just really like allow myself to like let go of having that food fear and letting that like hold me back for so many years. I let that linger over me for like over 10 years. And I think that like recovery is a funny thing. I think that it's sort of a thing that just continuously goes on for your entire life, and that's okay. But you need to be able to admit that to yourself, no one else. And I think that that was what was really important for me, was like I didn't really like, make it too public that I wanted to like specifically focus on this area. But I think over time I like saw so much improvement in my running that I wanted to share that. And in sharing that, you just like realize how many other people are still struggling with their relationship with food and how like almost normalized it is in the running community. So I just want you to take this as your sign that like if you still struggle with that area of like your nutrition and your running journey, just to like start challenging yourself to take steps to work on your relationship with food. And you might not struggle with eating carbohydrates like I did, but I think that there are definitely areas that everyone can work on. And ultimately, like that is what fuels you to go faster and to run for longer. And yeah, my third tip is definitely around nutrition. I really believe that it really changed the game for me, and I'm excited to continue pushing to challenge myself this year in my next training block. My fourth tip is around recovery, and recovery doesn't just pertain to like, taking a rest day. I think that that's super important. I know that some people have run streaks and that's for those people, but for me, I've learned that like me and my body need at least one rest day a week. And I like to look at recovery in a couple of different ways. I think one of the most important parts is sleep, and it's something that I definitely downplayed for the longest time. And like most of last year, like literally like before I moved in with Gabriel, I would get like 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night. I was barely sleeping. I would sleep maybe 7 hours on a good night. I remember like Gabriel was just like, how are you not sleeping like more? And once I started sleeping more, like now I average 8 to 9 hours a night. Sometimes like on the weekends, I'll sleep 10 hours. And I have felt truly so much better in myself. I feel like my body recovers a lot faster. I feel less sore. Like I feel like I used to always really struggle with like trying to recover before my next run. And I feel like now like that process has like definitely sped up a bit for me. I think that nutrition and hydration also play a huge part in recovery, and just like eating, at least 30 minutes after a run, and just making sure that you're refueling yourself, but also going to the gym, doing the physio work if you've been injured like me before, and just making sure that you're doing like that rehab and that mobility stuff and continuously practicing that. I think that like obviously people have like compression boots or like do ice baths. For me, I'll do like a hot bath with some muscle salts from time to time, but that's about it. I think like ultimately like focusing on sleep and recovery are so important, and just like especially in a training cycle to help you recover properly before your next run. I think also with recovery comes like the topic of easy runs, and I was so guilty for the longest time of not taking my easy runs easy. And I think that part of recovery as well is ensuring that you are taking those easy runs easy and going a pace that truly feels comfortable for you. And I used to not be a heart rate person, and lately I've definitely been focusing on keeping my easy runs at like a 150 heart rate kind of zone, and I think that that's like zone 2. I'm completely new to this, so I could be totally wrong. I wear a Coros Pace 3. I've done a whole video on running watches that I've used in the past and comparing them. I really enjoy utilizing my Coros to ensure that I'm running in like the right zone and not like pushing myself too much, and kind of just like letting go of that ego of like having to run all my runs at a certain pace, and actually like realizing that I can run more mileage when I take it down a notch and I just run at a slower, easier pace for myself. And I think that also leads to less injury and more recovery, and yeah, just your ability to run more, which is every runner's dream. Okay, lastly, I think that something that's really helped me get faster is my form. This is something that I referenced with like the whole hydration backpack thing. And again, I'm not trying to downplay hydration backpacks. I think that they are great for people who want them and like them and want to use them for races. I'm not saying that I'll never wear one again, but I think I really notice a difference in my form when I wear it versus when I don't. And when it comes to racing, I have really made a conscious effort to try and run with my shoulders back more and just like have a straighter back. I feel like this training cycle as well, I'm going to try and implement a lot more core work, which I think is really helpful in just like stabilizing your entire upper body when you're running marathons. And so I think with form, I've also gotten a biomechanical assessment done prior, and I think I've done a video on that before. If I have, I'll link it down below. I think that it makes a world of a difference when you focus on your form and you focus on like how you're running, make sure that you are not doing anything to injure yourself. And I think that there's so much to be said as well about like how that can help you over time. And especially during a marathon when like you hit the wall and like things get really tough, I think that it's really like helpful to help your running in like keeping a stable core and being able to run strong. All right, you've been talking too long when your SD card runs out of batteries, so I'm going to take that as a sign. I hope that you get what I'm saying with the whole form thing. I just feel like it makes such a difference, especially someone like me who struggles with like having good posture when it comes to literally just like everyday life. I feel like it's something that I really do try and like focus on when I am running. But that wraps up all 5 tips that I have from how I believe and what has like helped me most in terms of getting faster. I hope that you really enjoyed this video/podcast episode, and make sure to tune in more because I come out with a new video/podcast episode every single Friday. Make sure to like the video if you are watching on YouTube and comment down below if you have run a marathon, if you have any videos that you would like to see from me in terms of what's next. I am going to be sharing soon in terms of like some shorter distance races that I will be racing upcoming this summer, and then what Chicago training will look like in the fall. Yeah, I'm excited to share sort of like what's next. And if you haven't yet, make sure that you subscribe to the channel because I come out with a new video every single week. And if you aren't following the podcast yet, you should do that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. But I hope to see you in the next episode/YouTube video. Bye.